Hi, Greg here for Party Foul with Scott behind the camera, and I'm going to talk about something called opening moves. Frank covered deployment. I recommend that you go check that out. That sort of covers all the stuff you need to be concerned about when you're deploying your army. Opening moves concerns itself with what happens immediately after deployment, your first couple of turns. So you've deployed, now what? How do you move forward and what is your plan? Do I run? Where do I run to? These are important questions, and they are questions that some players, including myself, fail to ask themselves. And that failure frequently leads to disaster. I've lost my share of games on deployment or on my unpacking of my army in turn 1 and turn 2 and how I plan my opening moves. So it's important to ask yourself those questions and take a little bit of time to think about it. These questions and actions you take based on the answers, these questions and the actions you take based on the answers you get from these questions are called opening moves. And you can win or lose a game depending on your opening moves even before a single attack roll is made. The definition of opening moves, my definition of opening moves, is turn 1 and turn 2 prior to scoring. They are the early positional steps in developing the battle. It can involve some skirmishing attacks, but it focuses normally on positioning your models. Turn 1 is not necessarily as simple as running everything forward as far as it can go, and time needs to be taken in consideration of model placement. I'm going to say something here that's very important, and it's something that I didn't even really internalize for the first 2 years of playing this game. It's important to recognize that the game has started. Turn 1, the game has started. You are making plans and making steps that are going to influence the rest of your game in turn 1. It's not just running up and taking as much ground as possible all the time. It seems obvious and redundant to some, but I played this game for 2 years thinking the game only really started or even mattered when you rolled dice and started removing models. Not true. Your opening moves are crucial. When I start talking about opening moves, I'm going to just make a note and say that some of these ideas come from chess doctrine. I'm not a chess expert, but I do believe that some chess background or knowledge is helpful when playing Warmachine. How do opening moves differ from deployment? Well, they differ in terms of their aims. Deployment is a general setup with considerations towards scenario, terrain, enemy disposition, or predicted enemy disposition, and the matchups you want to create between your units. It's your initial plan, but no plan survives contact with the enemy. It needs to be developed. That's what opening moves are for. It's going to change depending on how your opponent deploys in response to you, or how you deploy in response to him in his advanced deployment, how he moves, and how you counter move. So, on the contrary, opening moves are designed to, there's a number of things I'm going to talk about, 6 important aims of opening moves. The first is to develop the table state. That is to mobilize your pieces into positions so that they will be impactful during the game. This depends a lot on your strategic goal, but commonly it involves deployment of low-value models backed by mid-value models, and generally the battle group is not committed heavily during this stage. There are exceptions to that rule, but as a general rule, the battle group is not committed during the opening moves. They are positioned. The second aim is to control the center. Scenario presence is crucial. Control of the center by deployment of hard-to-remove models or by threatening the center with powerful models. As mentioned earlier, low-value models are generally committed to the center of the table in these opening moves. It is important to know what your strategy is. Do you intend on clearing one or more areas, contest, or just threaten them? It is important to consider the scenario, the size and orientation of zones or flags in this decision. The third aim, war-noun safety. Many games end on turn 2 due to careless war-noun placement or inadequate consideration given to protection of your war-noun. War-noun safety needs to start in deployment, but your opening moves allow you to develop that defense and position your war-noun with the following considerations. His ability to dominate zones or flags, if you believe he's capable of doing that. 2, the ability to support models or units with spells and abilities. Very, very crucial. Consider it. Okay, a lot of people will just cast on my upkeeps and charge up the table and get as far enough up. That may not be the best play for you depending on what your opponent's army is like and if they're very assassination oriented. The fourth aim of opening moves, forward model support. Some part of your army needs to move up the table, generally, so that your opponent doesn't jam you out of the scenario. It is important to support these models so that if the enemy chooses to remove them, you have other models to retaliate with. It's been a number of games where I've seen the player gets his advanced deployment guys so far up the table that the opponent is allowed to remove them without any sort of retaliation whatsoever. You don't want to fall into that trap. Okay? Do not make the mistake of thinking that high defense, armor, or tough rolls of the forward models are adequate enough. They need to be supported. Fifth aim, model support. This includes models with buffs and abilities that require proximity to other models to function properly. They need to be positioned so that they can do their job safely. It also includes supporting your second line and forward support models with additional covering pieces. The final aim, create a table state that is more comfortable to you than your opponent. This can involve greater threat ranges, creating areas that are dangerous for war nouns or key models to occupy, or setting up favorable matchups or exchanges. I have heard, I can't remember who it was, somebody on the internet say that War Machine is kind of like, during your turn, you're setting up a problem for your opponent to solve. In those opening moves, you want to set a problem that is uncomfortable for your opponent to answer. That's going to give him difficult decisions to make. Okay, I'm going to talk briefly about tactical play versus positional play. They're not mutually exclusive, but they're important to consider as different sort of things. Tactical play focuses on exchanges and matchups. This can involve removing threats to key models or achieving a simple attrition advantage. Tactical play focuses more on short-term gains. Positional play focuses on long-term maneuvering to gain a strategic advantage. And that can be plans to get a heavy into a certain position by a certain turn, or a warcaster into a certain position to dominate or control, those types of things. Like I said before, tactical play and positional play are not mutually exclusive. You should be using both of those. I know that when I first started the game, I was not doing positional play at all. I was just playing with whatever was fed to me by my opponent, whatever I happened to have up front at the time. Much more tactical. Okay, role of strategy in the opening moves. If the role of the opening moves is to develop the table state for the middle and end game, it's preferable that the player have a strategic goal in mind at the beginning. It is possible to develop the table for simple short-term tactical exchanges, but that risks being drawn into a strategic situation that appears to have attritional advantage to you, but strategically favors your opponent. That can be where you are lured into an unseen assassination, or your opponent offers you an attritional advantage over here when he plans to dominate the zone over here and win by scenario. So here's some notes on strategy. Some of your possible strategic goals. The way to win War Machine is scenario win, assassination win, clock win. Those are the only ways you win War Machine. Attrition, on the other hand, is a tool by which you win the game. It's not a win condition. It can be a tactical goal to facilitate an ultimate strategic goal, one of those three things, but it is not a strategic goal in and of itself. And that's the difference between tactical play and positional play. Timing of strategic goal. Early, late, and opportunistic. Know what your army and playstyle favors, and also know or attempt to know what strategic goals your opponent seeks. Is he going to try to dominate the zone or the flag? Is he going to try for an early assassination? Be prepared for it. Know your location of your strategic goal. Which zone do you intend to control or dominate? Will your opponent's war noun be located where he will be, and when will he be most vulnerable if you're going to try to assassinate? What tools will you need to accomplish your strategic goal, and where do they need to be located? So that's when you can start to position those key pieces to suit and fit into your strategic goal. A brief note about standard unpacking versus fluid unpacking. A lot of people have a sort of standard deploy that might be slightly modifiable depending on the scenario and their opponent, and they might also have a standard unpack, a standard way to develop their army in that first turn, where they're going to run with these guys and they're going to trample with this and do all this stuff, right? Because maybe they want to cast Animai or launch Servitor or something. Standard unpacking is good. It's important to have a standard unpack for your army, but at the same time, you have to be flexible enough to know that your standard unpack is not going to work in either certain scenarios or with certain scenarios and certain opponents. So don't get stuck in a rut and just do your standard unpack. Have one, don't rely on it completely. Finally, why are opening moves important? I have lost games on deployment. I've lost games when I fail to unpack my army in a way that allows me to react properly to the strategic situation. In almost every one of these situations, it was because I did not have a clear strategic goal in mind at the outset of my first turn. I didn't know how I wanted to win the game. I was simply running models or unpacking a force by muscle memory. I've lost on scenario by turn 3. If you've lost on scenario by turn 3, you've also made this mistake. If you've asked yourself why one of your models is in a certain location instead of another, you've probably made this mistake as well. I can't stress enough that this game is being played every time you move or don't move a model. Unlike other games, War Machine is a game that rewards foresight, planning, and players with a clear strategic goal and the knowledge and skill to work towards that goal. Before you do anything in turn 1, take 60 seconds of your clock and consider the following. What are my strategic goals? 2. What are my opponent's strategic goals? 3. Where do my models need to be to accomplish my goals and prevent my opponent from accomplishing his? With that, you should be able to visualize where you want your army to be at the end of turn 2. That will allow you to make informed opening moves and unpack your army appropriately. The next step will be taking that knowledge and projecting it into the middle game. We'll be doing another video on that. Be sure to check it out.